Hey, my name is Francis, and today I'll be doing an updated video of my tennis journey video from 2023. Admittedly, I'm a pretty slow learner, but I'm pretty happy with how far I've come. But let's go back to 2017, where it all began.
Here it is, the very beginning of my tennis journey, all the way back in good old 2017. So I started my tennis journey at the age of 29, and I was trying to find a hobby that involved more exercising and not sitting around. And also early on, I was trying to go between both a one-handed and two-handed backhand. I wasn't quite sure what I liked more. As for the forehand side, I was using a continental grip almost, or at least it was more Eastern than today. Now, even though I was going between both a one- and two-handed backhand, I preferred the one-handed backhand at this point. And that was mostly due to me being a big Federer fan. I loved his one-handed backhand. Mine didn't quite look the same, but that's okay at this point.
Good job.
And like most beginning players, I started with a slow pancake serve technique. And on that note, let's move on to 2018. By this point, I had a really strange and aggressive pancake serve. I'm just really surprised that I was able even to pull this off. I mean, look at this. I'm even just kind of impressed, to be honest. And after 1 year of playing, I've decided to use a one-handed backhand and stick with that, and still looks like I'm using an Eastern-ish grip for the forehand still. Early on, I ignored my footwork like most people do in the beginning, and I only realized many years later that it was bad and I would finally take some action, but it'll take a while until then. Toward the end of this year, my forehand grip slowly became more Western as I needed a way to deal with those higher bounce shots and a way to add some topspin. 2019 was a year where my game drastically changed, but I don't think it was entirely for the better. Later on in the year, I would develop some very strange habits. My forehand not only became a little bit Western, but it became so extremely Western that it was maybe even a Hawaiian grip. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it developed just for myself to add some kind of topspin, but maybe I went a little bit too far. But I will say, as ugly as my forehand and backhand looked back then, I was still actually winning a lot of sets and matches here and there. But yeah, not that pretty at all. And by the end of 2019, I'd attempt to fix that problem, and it worked temporarily, but I would quickly go back to my bad habits, unfortunately. And as you can imagine, 2020 was a very strange year. Like earlier in 2019, I had bad habits such as leaning back way too much, or just not going into the ball when I'm hitting. And I will add that I pretty much had no footwork at all, so to speak, where I'm just waiting for the ball to come to me and sprinting or running when I needed to, just not actively moving and split-stepping. And that's when the COVID-19 lockdown happened. Suddenly, everyone was forced to stay home, people were battling for their toilet paper, and of course lots of Zoom meetings. All the while, I was practicing my volleys indoor in my apartment at the time against a wall. Don't worry, there were no neighbors on the other side of that. But I was trying to maintain some type of hand-eye coordination with my tennis game while I was stuck at home. But let me tell you, I was craving tennis so badly that I even made racket-shaped pasta that Sinner would even be envious of. But later on, I was at least able to hit outside at some point. Here's me hitting a ball on a string. I mean, for the time, it was better than nothing, and I did get to run into other tennis fans, so that was exciting. Now, I'll skip 2021 because I don't have any footage from then, but 2022 is where I take recording a bit more seriously, and what got me into it was the new app at the time, Swing Vision. And this was actually an important turning point for me where I realized that both my forehand and backhand looked really strange, and even my footwork looked a bit off. And by the end of 2022, I would try to switch to a pinpoint stance serve, but later I would go back to a platform one as it was a bit too many moving pieces for me, and I needed to keep things simple as I was struggling with this shot already. And 2023 is the year that I make really big changes to my game in various ways. For starters, I start to record myself much more often, and that's actually one of the best decisions I've made in hindsight. It's just an effective way to give myself immediate feedback as to what I'm doing right or what I'm doing wrong. But arguably the biggest change of the year was me switching to a two-handed backhand, and this was mostly due to pain and overuse of my right arm when I was using the one-hander. And this was an incredibly difficult change for me to make after nearly 5 years of using a one-handed backhand exclusively. But I was really determined to make this change as my arm pain was a bit too much, and I was willing to put in the work to make this change. Also, at the beginning of this year, I was still practicing a pinpoint stance serve, but as I mentioned earlier, I would eventually switch back to the platform stance as it was slightly easier. Nearly halfway through the year, I start trying to use the two-handed backhand more in actual gameplay or just rallying situations. It was also around this time that I finally tried to improve my footwork a little bit. Not perfect, but at least a lot better than it was not too long ago. And by August of this year, I finally make my first YouTube video, and it's a really big step in improving my tennis. Just trying to visualize and get some immediate feedback as to what I need to fix here and there. And in order to improve my tennis, I used Swing Vision a lot. Really liked the stats of the speed, the type of spin, the ball placement. But soon after, I would switch to just good old-fashioned editing and try to learn that type of skill from scratch. And as I started recording myself more and more, definitely improved my game quite a bit in a relatively short time. Though I will still get passed by Jin sometimes. Also recording myself early on, I noticed that my serve and backhand particularly needed a lot of improvement. But even with those flaws, the recordings helped improve my game, and particularly I noticed that it improved my footwork quite a lot. I could at least catch myself when I wasn't moving my feet, and just really make sure that I keep moving, and also split step when I get the chance. And with 2023 coming to an end, I have to say that in my journey overall, this was the year that I made the most improvement in terms of my technique. Still far from perfect, but way better than what it used to be. 2024 was another very significant year where my goal was to focus on singles match experience. Prior to then, I only had very good experience when it came to just group classes or drills, but never actually playing full-out sets. And at the beginning of this year, I went on a really long win streak for about 3 months, which equated to 11 wins in a row. Pretty proud of myself for that one. But prior to this year, my overall win rate was actually very low, and that was mostly due to a lack of my match play experience. So again, this year was mostly about just match experience and less about the technique side of things, unlike the previous year of 2023. Before, whenever I played a match, I would tend to play much worse versus when I was doing drills. But that would change as this year progressed and I got more and more experience from playing a set. So I would finally lose to Adam by the month of March. But little did I know that things would get much, much worse very soon, as I would get my very first injury. I would get my first injury ever playing tennis, and it was a really serious case of tennis elbow. I've had it before, but not this serious. Now, this tennis elbow injury would last for a long time, but it would slowly get better, and I could still play, but not very well.
We're now 3 weeks into my tennis elbow injury with very little to show for the recovery. Unfortunately, it still hurts quite a lot whenever I take a swing.
It was from this tennis elbow injury that I realized that my pure arrow was a bit too stiff along with the polystring setup I was using. I'm unsure if that's the culprit, but I knew one thing for sure was that it wasn't helping the situation. And this led me to switch to a Yonex racket for the first time, a Yonex V-Core 100. A lot more flexible in comparison, and I had to string it with natural gut strings at 38 pounds. So at this point, I was mostly hitting neutral pace shots on my forehand side due to the pain, not going for anything too crazily big, just trying to keep a steady pace.
It's nearly week 7 into my tennis elbow saga, and it's luckily getting better now, as opposed to last week where I was about like 70% back. I'm close now to like 75-80%.
But still, the recovery is really slow, and gotta have a lot of patience. And it's also because of this injury, I don't think I'm able to fully extend my arm out for my forehands to this day. That's how impactful that injury was. So I end up with a pretty bent arm when I hit my forehands. But by the month of May, my tennis elbow recovery is at 85 to 90% back, and at least I'm making some major progress in terms of playing back at my normal level. Now, I know you're thinking that even though I'm injured, I probably shouldn't be practicing, but I still persisted back then because I enjoyed the game too much. What can I say? But even while only recovered at 85 to 90%, I was still playing pretty decently overall. I think that's mostly due to just the amount of experience by this point. And I think it's a major saving grace that I switched to a two-handed backhand. My injury for my arm would have been far worse relying on just one arm and overextending it. Also, the new racket setup that I switched to made a huge difference. changing to a more flexible racket with lower tension and using natural gut strings, a big difference for my arm. But I was still struggling a lot against big hitters such as knockers or Wei. During this time, it was pretty dangerous to get into rally situations with them as they could often out-hit me. Also, I was trying to play a more aggressive style for this year of 2024 and was not very patient in hindsight. Regardless, by the month of June, my recovery was nearly at 100% and I could nearly play back to normal. By this point, I was about 3 months into the injury, so toward the end of this painful saga. And June was a month where I played outdoors a lot. I had to change my launch angle to be higher to adjust for the wind that could batter my shots down. Overall, I'd say I'm much more used to playing indoors versus outdoors. But yeah, it was not until 2024 that I really started playing outdoors more, at least during the summer months. And as you can guess, a very different game from indoors with all the elements to be aware of. The month of June was also a month where I got plenty of hard court practice, which is not very often with myself. As you can see in my other videos, I play on clay the most by far. So this was really good practice for me to play on a surface that was a bit faster and also the bounce was sometimes higher. But regardless, I was still struggling against those really big hitters such as knockers, even when getting enough practice on the hard courts. But another big challenge, and arguably the biggest challenge for me, was just having a lot of different roles when making the videos, being the cameraman, the editor, and the tennis player all at the same time. And I was being spread thin from doing all 3 roles while uploading a video every 2 days on the channel. But regardless, I still played quite well for the month of July in 2024, even with it being brutally hot. It was also during this month that I decided to play a more aggressive play style and taking more risks in my shots, hitting bigger. Maybe it was just my lack of patience, but it was pretty fun at least when it worked. But on the other side of the coin, when playing more aggressive, I noticed that my game would drastically lower in the middle of the set. I would run out of energy, the unforced errors would go flying up in numbers. So always more risk to account for when I do that. So when playing more aggressively, I noticed my game in the beginning would be very good and high level for, well, at least me. But then later on, my body would almost quit on itself, and it just led to me losing a lot of matches. And my tennis elbow would come back to haunt me, as you can see from the arm sleeve here. Just not properly preparing before each match, not stretching enough, not staying hydrated enough. Just pretty poor preparation overall before matches, unfortunately. And for the month of August, I continued playing an aggressive play style, but still had those energy dips mid-set. Still something that I actually struggle with nowadays in 2025, while I record this video. Despite my energy shortcomings, I was still playing quite decently though, at least for my standards, getting a good amount of wins here and there. And I think a big contributing factor even to this day is my forehand, and even though technique-wise it's not the most elegant or the most pretty, it did help me win a lot of matches, just my strongest shot offensively speaking. Even if I'm not hitting a flat-out winner, at least it helps me set up a lot of points and just construct the points. And at this time, I was still struggling a lot on clay, which is a bit weird to hear from me. I play on that surface the most, but lots of strange bounces or the slippery surface would mess me up a lot. But by August, I was still making a lot of progress with my outdoor hardcore play, getting more and more used to it as I do more and more matches. Which was my goal for this year to begin with, to play more matches and get the experience for playing the matches. And technique-wise, for sure, one of my biggest improvements was my confidence in my two-handed backhand in gameplay situations. Before this year, I was only confident with it during drills, but as I use it more and more, I get more confident. Little did I know, however, my body was reaching its limit, going between work and editing and tennis. It was a little bit too much for my body. And all of this would lead to my second injury of 2024, the only year so far that I had any kind of injury related to tennis.
I got some unfortunate news. At the very end of August, I've sustained yet one more injury aside from my tennis elbow. While playing some casual doubles, I tore the muscle in my right calf. Compression device on my legs every morning and evening. That's just to get the blood flow going throughout my legs and hopefully quicken the recovery process.
With this calf tear injury, I would later try to hit a ball again with a ball machine, and it felt like I was relearning tennis. It felt so strange. It would not be until yet another month later that I could start playing an entire set again and kind of feel normal. It was from this point onward that I had to be very strategic about how I schedule my tennis, making sure I have enough rest in between to recover and not make the same mistake again. And at the end of the year, I would get bageled by a really good player as the last match of the year. I decided after this match to stop being aggressive and go for something different coming into 2025.
Hey everybody, my name is Francis, and today we got our first match of the year.
Now, coming into 2025, I went for a more conservative pusher style of play as my theme for this year, mostly playing high percentage shots, making sure I get enough topspin, enough height over the net, and going for larger targets on the court without hitting at 100% of power. And what led me to play this way for the majority of this year was the last match of the previous year, 2024, when I got bageled by Sumer. It was a wake-up call for me when I was losing the majority of my points from just being overly aggressive and impatient. So instead, for 2025, I went for kind of the opposite direction of last year, being aggressive and just being more of a pusher and being very, very consistent when possible. And the pusher style for me was so effective, in fact, that I remained undefeated for the year, at least for singles, until June 23rd, more than halfway through the year, which would lead to 27 wins in a row, which is pretty much unheard of for myself. Meanwhile, I was trying to minimize my double faults, very intentionally swinging upwards more on serve, but also trying to add a lot of spin to try and minimize those double faults and have that kick. And by playing a pusher style, or at least a style that was based more on consistency, it made me realize my mental patience is really important for me to construct the points and not just try to flat out hit winners all the time, even though this is a winner right here. And by changing my mental mindset, it even helped me play against very consistent players such as Jin, whom I would struggle against a lot in the past, where he would be really patient and just have me make all the errors and have myself be defeated. By the month of March in 2025, I was still undefeated but came across some really good players that challenged that streak. Going for a big forehand winner here. I think that's the only winner I have all of this set. I just saw him moving in one direction and hit in the opposite one, so very difficult to change directions on the surface. Really big, so at first I tried to attack the net a couple times, attempting to throw him off balance, put pressure on him, and draw out some errors that way, which did work a couple times, and I don't know why I didn't continue doing that. By April of this year, I would start going for more big forehands whenever I had any easy opportunities, kind of straying away from that pusher style, but mostly sticking to it. And finally, I found some success against those big hitters by effectively neutralizing their shots just by being consistent, having those high percentage shots again, and not trying to out-hit them and playing at their own game. And I also found that playing the consistency game was very helpful when outdoors to offset the wind conditions just a little bit. And I will say that it did help from the previous year in 2024 that I played a good amount outdoors, that it just gave me that experience and confidence and not feel as uncomfortable like before. But still, it's safe to say that I play much better on the indoor clay courts. That's just from the sheer amount of experience. By the month of May in 2025, my confidence was at an all-time high, still undefeated by this point. And also sticking with that high percentage style of play with just lots of height over the net and lots of topspin especially. I was even having more confidence attacking the net when the opportunity was there, but still preferred the baseline. But hey, that was a pretty decent backhand smash at least. But I was still struggling a little bit to make those opportunities happen, to do, in fact, attack the net. My approach shots aren't the greatest, and I might make errors, so pretty far from perfect. And I also might approach with a slice or like a chip and charge, so not aggressive enough when going to the net, and they could easily pass me. And just like last year, I still struggle when the set goes really long, and I tend to have less energy than my opponents, I've noticed. It must be probably a fitness issue. I've addressed this by bringing more water when playing or extra wristbands, and it seems to make a little bit of a difference, so at least some improvement since last year. By this point, it's the beginning of June, and still undefeated, playing pretty solidly and sticking with that high consistency style. And it really goes to show, like what a lot of coaches say, is that consistency is more important than power, and it goes a long way to construct the points versus just abruptly ending them with winners. And during this month, it was apparent that the experience from the previous year of 2024 was really paying off and gave me a lot of confidence in nearly all aspects of my game, even though it's not perfect. It was also by June that I started to play slightly more aggressive, even more so than the previous month of May, and just work on my offensive game. I was being very defensive for most of the year, but decided to work on that offense aspect as well. It would be on June 13th that I get my first loss against another YouTuber who is a much higher level than myself. He's a 5-0, I'm just at best maybe a 4-0. So it was a great experience though to play against someone far better than myself, an ex-college player. By the way, you should check out this guy's channel, Trickster Kev. He's got some really good matches that are quite exhilarating and very high level, so be sure to check it out. It was also around this time that I started to play against some really strong opponents that I've never faced before, more consistent than myself, and I was forced to take a lot more risk in my shots, be more offensive, and I have to go for low percentage shots just to get any kind of point off of them. So as a result, I got a couple losses in the month of June as well, even though it was also relatively successful too. Plus, once again, I ran into my fatigue issues like the previous year, even with my extra water, extra wristbands and whatnot, but just running out of the energy. Not to discredit my opponents or anything like that, they played actually much better than me in these cases, so I don't think even with my full energy that could have saved me. But it does feel kind of bad when you just run out of energy mid-set. Among the plentiful issues I have in my game still, I continue to work on my backhand still, my two-handed backhand, and my serving. Those are by far the weakest parts of my game that give me problems during matches. So those are the two areas that I continue to work on technique-wise as I try to get even more experience for match play. The month of July in 2025 was a brutally hot and humid month with tough losses and also some spectacular wins at the same time. It was during the month of July that I was able to bagel several different players, which is quite rare for me. Even though I try to play the consistency game, I still drop a lot of games or make errors here and there, so it's a bit surprising that I got 3 bagels in this 1 month. But at the same time, I would also meet more really good players that are more consistent than me, so again, I'm forced to take more risks and try to play to my strengths as much as possible, try to have as many forehands as possible in my case, which is my best shot. Here would be the second bagel that I get of the month. And you know, it's still surprising to me because Knockers was somebody that I struggled against a lot last year with his big hitting, and he could often overpower me in these long rallies and just out-hit me. Here I would try to play against Chris again, only did slightly better against him this time, so at least some improvement. I think what helped was just cutting back on the aggression a little bit and again sticking with the consistency game. I was a bit too aggressive the first time, so too many errors out of that. This would be the third bagel that I get in the month of July. Still having some pretty good success in this month, even though I faced against some really tough opponents at the same time. Continuing from the previous month, I try to be a bit more aggressive, either hitting bigger or going to the net when the opportunity arises, not, being too aggressive, still trying to play that pusher consistency type of game, but when I see a floating ball, I'll try to go for it. But at the same time, when the situation gets tough, I might revert back to that pusher defensive play more, even unintentionally when I'm not even really thinking about it. Or the other time when I'm more defensive is when I don't have confidence in my shots and I just want to play as high percentage as possible to at least get the point going. But when I'm able to have the right mindset of attacking and have that confidence, I'm able to have really good results. For instance, when I'm playing against Sumer right here, who's way better than me, I was able to, unlike last time when I got bageled, get the game to be way closer, losing 4-6. So, big improvements when I have that right mindset. And that brings us to the present, so far in my tennis journey at least, as of this recording. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this video update of my tennis journey, and I hope you stick around to see where this journey takes me later on. So be sure to check out my videos, and thanks again for watching, really appreciate it.